Alex Ansary here. It is May 2nd in the year 2018. I want to talk to you about this video game called Far Cry 5. Now, I'm personally not a gamer, but I've been aware of the plot behind Far Cry 5 for over a year, and my view on it was alarm initially, just seeing that it was a shoot-'em-up game based in rural America, where you can even look at it from the perspective of off-grid Americans being considered the enemy, but it's really a little bit deeper than that when you look at the plot itself. It's rural America. It's in the current political climate in which people are very divided over politics and beliefs, and it's a game that's being marketed for an international audience. And whether or not this game is being played in China or not, I'd be very curious to know that. Let me know your thoughts on Far Cry 5 with regards to predictive programming in the comment section down below. But I think that this is a conversation that's actually going to be ongoing. This isn't just something that's fleeting like certain movies and certain plots that have come and gone. This seems to be a big-time production. So if we look at some of my concerns that I shared last year, for example, those concerns were mostly concentrated on the idea of the game being predictive programming, making rural Americans the enemy, and very much in line with this concern about a plan to occupy the United States. And my concerns are still the same, but what I can say a year later, and I can elaborate at OutsideTheBox.vhx.tv, but I'm going to be brief. Far Cry 5 is set in Hope County, Montana. But you can look at it another way from my eyes and see it as my current county in Colorado and the mindset that is here. Far less so in places like Costilla. Far less so in places like Denver. Very much so in places like this. And as you've heard me say in a recent video, I actually moved into a region that has a lot of people of a certain mindset. They're the same mindset that I was going off grid to get away from. Not move into like a hornet's nest of. It wasn't just economics. And I think it's better to be living off the grid in rural America than homeless in the city. But this type of, especially in Colorado, fear of outsiders, obsessing on outsiders being the cause of their problems. We can get a little bit more specific as to what type of outsiders they hate the most, for example, but I think by now that's become obvious. There are certain demographics of human beings that have become enemy number one to a certain demographic of America that hasn't learned the difference between real information and falsified information on the internet. Nor are some of these people aware the government has its agents, in some cases, embedded within the alternative media. Those people that have large audiences that have been purporting to be for the people, pushing certain conspiracy theories that I think there's a fair amount of truth in recent years, only to see a bait and switch to where there was concern about government, military action, the economy, to people literally in recent years acting like everything is fine. And some people are just simply mystified, right, by Donald Trump. And this is really a larger conversation than the current political situation. And so it's not so much that some people are agents, but that they really do believe that there has been positive change within our country. They may not know, for example, that multiple administrations, including Barack Obama, have actually been working on behest of globalists. They may think that Obama himself is guilty, but other people are innocent, but it's really the same system. And so the same system will use technology, they will use social media, they will use Facebook to custom tailor their message, the propaganda, if you will, for a number of years. But it's more than putting a candidate in office. It's about creating unrest. And many people are wondering, well, why would they want to create unrest and turn person against person within the United States, and people literally on wild goose chases, making basically in some cases their neighbors their enemies over politics, over disagreements. And like I said recently, there's an all-time high, I've noticed this starting last year, of people calling for their political opposition to either be raped, put in camps, or killed. Okay, I never saw people like this talking this way 5 years ago, but they do now. There's also places in America where there are droughts and extreme fire risks. But oddly enough, there are people that live in some of those communities that literally, in their spare time, use social media, Facebook, to go kill, kill, kill. You know, to literally talk about nuking elements of the planet Earth in order to make it safer. And yet, out of the other side of their mouth, they're concerned about wildfires, also something that comes from nature. It's not just human beings. So I'm seeing this consistent fear of nature, resistance to nature, a misunderstanding of the law of attraction, people creating very negative thought forms that are actually at risk of wildfires. And there are people out there that actually get this, the idea of energy, the idea of thoughts having power. And there are people in this world that will never understand that concept. So what I'm seeing now, more now in 2018 than any other time in human history, is this manufactured unrest, this manufactured hatred, even against people that would actually be their friends and allies in many cases, would actually help them with information and in other ways, right? Like this whole idea of being against the New World Order isn't like just for a certain demographic. It's something that affects us all. And what I see certain groups doing is marginalizing, to where if someone from the left or the right doesn't know any better, they would just straight up put someone in their box. They would just easily make someone their enemy if they don't agree with what they believe. So I see leftists doing this, and I see people on the right doing this. I've experienced this from people on the right as someone that was born in Portland, lived in Portland, was on the air in Portland, and moved away from Portland, was home free in Portland. That wasn't by accident. There was a left-sided demographic society that marginalized me as right-wing extremist. And it wasn't fair then, and it isn't fair now. But it'll continue now from the right side, while the left side, even those that don't like Donald Trump, will still discount my information because of those things they consider right-wing. All based on this divide and conquer. So why does that concern me? Because I'm looking at a number of different threatening situations at the same time. You have a demographic of America that believes the disinformation that's planted on the internet to create the divide and conquer, illusions, and separation game. Okay, so that would be like simulation one. Simulation one is using the internet to radicalize an element of the human population. Simulation two is the video game. Now that they've created, right, this angry mob that's divided and conquered over politics and left-right paradigms and all different types of hysterias, which I've been discussing for years and years. Now that they've created that pool of individuals, now they have that villain created, that manufactured threat. Then they put that manufactured threat character in a literal video game, and they literally market it worldwide, and they call it Far Cry 5. This is not a joke. This video game is not funny. People can go ahead and sit all day making video games, playing a first-person shooter game where they're going through rural America, even hurting the farmer's daughter, like this is some sort of a joke, like it's Grand Theft Auto where you beat the prostitute. And see, people don't realize what problem, reaction, solution is in the world situation. And so whether we're talking about North Korea, Syria, or Iran, I've always said before this country is attacked by those other nations and the occupation begins to where we'll see war crimes against the American people, there will be that problem, reaction, solution situation to where America is made the number one enemy, just like they did other countries that already lost their governments, by the way. Places like Afghanistan. The Taliban were holding the Afghan people hostage with money that they received from the ISI, which is Pakistan's intelligence, which is linked to the U.S. CIA. U.S. intelligence. This is something that a lot of people don't understand. So I want you to think about this and think about this slowly. It's the idea of societies being infiltrated, even activist groups, and being radicalized by design by intelligence agencies in various countries around the world to thus demonize everybody else that's in that community, that's in that state, that's in that city, that's in that neighborhood. Whether it be Fallujah, or whether it be in a neighborhood in a future or an area in a future American territory. And when you look at Far Cry 5, Falling on the Hills, it's not so much about the election, it's about disinformation on the internet through particular people in the alternative media helping manufacture that unrest in the United States. To where we're no longer talking about the issues like 9/11, the police state, the surveillance society, the economic collapse. We're no longer like unified over core issues, but now divided over new divisive issues that were not heavily present prior to 2014. There were issues that we were divided on, right? There were more people that understood the things that Alex Ansary was saying before, of course, all this noise came in to compete. A much louder voice, not of reason, but of noise. A voice of noise, not of reason, but a voice of noise, a very loud voice. People like Alex Jones and others being plastered all around the media. #1 in the YouTube charts, and others, just this whoop, sleep, as they in a Orwellian fashion tell you 2 + 2 = 5, when it really only equals 4. They can go ahead and use "they live" as some sort of analogy to what they are trying to help their audiences see through the sunglasses, see through what? Okay, because when we see them engage in their own obey, do as you're told, right? Don't question what you're being told. Do as I say, not as I do. You know, and then of course, the hypocritical mindset. From 9/11 to demonize them all, to lock them all up, to put them in all in the same box, while saying somebody supports 9/11 truth. Oh, 9/11, we question that, but San Bernardino and these other things, we don't question that. And so everything's heading for the United States to surpass anything Nazi Germany was accused of. The United States, it's set to surpass in the Middle East through its actions everything Nazi Germany was accused of. The numbers of the death toll, what the U.S. has done and is doing, is surpassing, even historically, even though, again, people question that. People that are becoming the new fans of Adolf Hitler are questioning the official story of Nazi Germany. But regardless of what side of the fence you're on, what the United States and Western powers are doing in Afghanistan and Iraq surpasses what Nazi Germany was accused of. I'm saying numbers-wise, that's why they don't count the dead. And then you see literally decades after, or a decade and a half after 9/11, whole groups of people that had nothing to do with 9/11 being demonized, and people on the internet in record numbers saying put them all in one spot and just poof. That leads only to one direction, folks, and what happens eventually to that society and their women and their children and the types of governments they end up in. And the type of government that we're going to end up in after all the smoking is cleared is not a government that's going to be more loving and respecting of our privacy and our freedom. It's a problem, reaction, solution scenario. In the same way the Taliban didn't act alone and receive funding from the outside to thus for a whole society to be devastated with bombs after and periods. And it's like Americans don't seem to complain so much about ISIS, by the way, when 61 innocent Afghans are killed, which has happened just the other day. But yet people will still confuse innocent Afghans with ISIS because it's convenient for people to do that. It feeds their inner archon. It feeds that inner demon. And see, what a lot of people don't understand about spiritual warfare, which is what we're going through, is that that's exactly what this is. They convince a number of different people to go in a more radicalized direction through the simulation, which we just got done discussing in depth. And I've been discussing over the last few years, just the simulation on the internet, making an enemy out of certain people so they can radicalize an element of our country to the point where Native Americans and Hispanics that aren't even Arabs are concerned about their own safety in certain communities, or even being marginalized as a foreigner. And then they market a worldwide video game called Far Cry 5, which looks like, physically, my off-grid community. From the trees to the hills, they make rural Americans the enemy now in an international video game. Now, mind you, while we're teetering on the edge, potentially, of the beginning of World War III, it was in the last year that the China PLA, People's Liberation Army, was training in Oregon at Camp Riley. Earthquake disaster response drills. Now, 10 years ago, people would be concerned about Chinese troops. And I think people almost have a turn-on attraction to fake news over real news. Like, oh yeah, Steve Quayle, China gonna invade Mexico. Oh yeah, give me more of that fake news about China invading Mexico. Like fake news people used to post 10 years ago. Now there's real stories about real Chinese troops doing real drills and exercises, but it's okay because it's Donald Trump. It's the Donald. The Donald is working the deal. This is schizophrenia. And it's not any different than the schizophrenia you saw from Barack Obama fans that would have a coexist sticker literally to the left or right of a Obama sticker. That's the mental illness. That's the mental illness that I escaped from when I moved away from Portland, Oregon. That's why. That's mental illness. That's not a people that are safe. That's not a people that can see threats on the horizon. That's a brainwashed society. Well, I'll tell you what, I've been seeing another version of the same brainwashed society in recent years. It's not a different society. It's not left versus right or left or right. It's the same schizophrenic society that will find their political messiahs and call everyone else their enemy that doesn't agree with them. Whether they be leftists or rightists, doesn't matter. It's the same Western society. You're either right or you're wrong. You're either left or you're right. You're either white or you're black. You're either white or non-white. You're either this or you're that. You're either a criminal or not a criminal. You're either this or you're that. You're either an American or you're not American. It's a society that is bipolar. We're in a bipolar society, ironically, with mental illnesses increasing by the day. See, and I was just telling my friend recently, it's like, and a lot of you already understand this, and a lot of people are in disagreement with this, but just the reality of watching television is a new thing for our species. If you really look at the whole trajectory, moving forward of mankind, watching moving images on a addictive level, be it YouTube or being addicted to Facebook or watching movies or the Netflix reality or people live in their little caves, and they keep just giving energy, these multinational corporations, to entertain them for a few hours a day. I mean, what is this? People ending up with smartphones in their hands, which they think is making them smart, but literally misdirecting their attention and misinforming them about people, places, and things that they never once began to actually research in their lives with an actual book from the library. We have literally a whole nation and society that hasn't bothered to research the histories of particular places in the world, that are learning about people, places, and things for the very first time through people like Alex Jones and the disinformation in the mainstream media, which they literally are two sides of the same coin. There's not them versus them. It's the same propaganda. It's the same lie that leads that same cliff. So we've only been exposed to the internet for so long. We've only been exposed to movies and mainstream media for so long. The idea of these services that are helping program us with updates about what's really going on. And video games have really only been around for so long. And for years and years, people were, okay with the Middle Eastern threat and Call of Duty. And then actually in recent years, just so you know, I'm not alone in this, there are white gamers that are going, hey, wait a minute, we're not used to being the enemy. We're the enemy now in a video game. Yeah, dude, and I'm not saying that's right either. I'm trying to explain to you they are making an enemy. Yes, you got it, out of white Americans. To the point where innocent white Americans that don't have extremist ideologies will still be viewed as extremists. How dare those Americans even allow Donald Trump to even stay in office? See, all different types of things. If you study the YouTube comment section, you'll see people that sound like they're in the military in foreign countries. It sounds like they're salivating to just hit their button. They're out there on the internet. Militant trolls that want war with the American people that are not in our country, but have access to YouTube or in the comment sections are trolling. They're there. They're there. And they're waiting for World War III. They're already seeing the signs. They're already interpreting the predictive programming without even realizing that it's predictive programming. And they're seeing the U.S. make a fool out of itself in the tradition of George Bush Jr., in the tradition of Barack Obama. And this will continue beyond the Donald Trump presidency, whether it's 4 terms or 4 years, rather, or 8 years, whether it's 1 or 2 terms. This isn't about George Bush, Barack Obama, or Donald Trump. Look at my earlier outside-the-box intros. There's me with a megaphone at a 2006 protest. This is bigger than Bush. That was a 26-year-old Alex Ansary speaking to you. The 38-year-old Alex Ansary speaking to you now is echoing that 12 years later. This is bigger than the Donald. Can you dig? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? So we have some rain here, by the way, in rural Colorado. I don't see a lot of people going, praise God for what nature's provided. I see a degenerate society that just fears things, fears fires, fears things that come from nature. Fear, fear, fear. Like a society that is at war with nature in its own mind, like psycho. And that is a society that is not apparently intuitive enough to see that it's being set up in a friggin' video game. The demonized Americans, the toothless Americans, go get them, yeah. And people play these video games now on an international basis. It's like, these are humans that are so dumbed down they don't even see their own history. There was a time where Arabs and Middle Eastern people were enemies in video games and Hollywood movies before 9/11, a staged event. To fast forward to where we are now, millions dead. But who's counting? And who cares? Like the Megadeth song, peace sells, but who's buying? Peace sells, but who's buying? And for over 10 years, I've said that I believe there is a plan for the occupation of America and to kidnap a great deal of American women and put them on the international black market. And I'm not actually discounting that certain other forms of non-human intelligences, I'm not discounting the idea that they're involved. Other people are making jokes about everything. They just inundate our culture with alien movies and alien video games and even alien porn. Everything thinks everything's just a big joke. Everything's fake. None of us are real. The earth is flat and so are we. We're really just a simulation in a computer. And it's like everything's insanity. The point where the real stuff and the real warnings and the real people that care about you aren't even being heard. Far Cry 5, #1 video game, #1 news item. It's like literally like commerce now, like the dollar. Like here's where the dollar standard is. Here's the stock of the company that sells Far Cry 5. And it's like, you know, even the people that will complain and say, they're making an enemy out of white people, white genocide. They're not even seeing how Far Cry 5 is propaganda for World War III simulation. For Chinese and Russian audiences worldwide and even beyond, for people to be playing Far Cry 5, get them, yeah, get the rancher's daughter, get it. And it's like, how do you help these people that don't even realize that they should be paying attention? You can't, and I can't. All I can do is say the things that need to be said, speak to you from my heart, and I know that in the future, that videos like this will be cherished. That the things that I've shared with you about karma, about playing with fire, why we shouldn't play with the fires of karma, people will take some of these things more seriously in the future. There is a video that you can find that shows all the different scenes from Far Cry 5, and I want you again to think about the type of Americans they've tried to radicalize online through their agents in the alternative media and the mainstream media. And think about what that looks like. And then you see the radicalization, you see even Facebook even promoting some of the disinformation, and you literally have programmed androids. Like you can literally just reproduce a new clone species, have a bunch of humans fornicate with each other, target them with propaganda and 9/11 events, and you have a complete, almost clone-like society ready for clone wars. And then you take that simulated man or woman, as I said before, and then you create video games where they're the new enemy of the world, and it's problem, reaction, solution, where they aim to do to America what they did to Afghanistan.
Oh, you know what Bill's doing now? He's going for the righteous indignation dollar. That's a big dollar. A lot of people are feeling that indignation. We've done research. Huge market. He's doing a good thing.
She's a beaut, ain't she? All this time. She ain't never let me down. I just hope she's around when he's old enough to fly. Ooh, my boy. I mean, I hope it's a boy. I just want him to fly her like I do. It's not like my dad or my grandpa. They flew in the war, so I didn't have to. But now, I don't know if he'll ever have the chance. Not with these around here. People are scared, man. I may never have gone to war. If them Peggies come after my family, sure as hell will give them one.
And this is the latest in a series of shoot-'em-up video games, high-tech graphics very similar to Grand Theft Auto. But what's interesting is the timing of this video game, which, as I can see, to a certain degree, it demonizes the off-gridder as a domestic terrorist, which is a problem that we have in our country, with also off-grid communities being infiltrated by suspicious sovereign individuals, which is something that I personally witnessed. Folks, we'll get to the game in just a bit. I want to welcome those of you that tuned into this video, but this is not your typical gaming review. This is about art imitating life and life imitating art. And so when I get an email from a documentary producer in New York, she wants to ask me about the sovereigns in Costilla County because I was there documenting the off-gridders being kicked off their land. People that were in a recent article that was published out of Denver, you know, this hipster Denver rag really served the government narrative. So someone in New York is thinking about a documentary about the sovereign threat in Colorado because of an article that she read. You know, it's like that old bit from Bill Hicks on marketing.
By the way, if anyone here is in advertising or marketing, kill yourself. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Just a little thought. I'm just trying to plant seeds.
And so some people are interested in covering some of these stories for the wrong reason. Because it's popular. Because there's an anti-Trump sentiment that's rising. Now, I'm not for Donald Trump, but I see how they play both sides, and it's really controlled chaos. It's really about manufactured civil unrest, and sometimes they have their convenient enemy. And it's marketable, and people will buy products. There's a video game like 10, 15 years ago where, it, you know, from I think Rockstar Games, where you're running around shooting things up in a friggin' shopping mall. And so these video games that are out there, and I'm not going to attack gamers, but I am going to say there's quite a bit of this predictive programming. Just like we see Call of Duty and other video games, they're depicting World War III. It's set in Montana, this video game. There's a doomsday cult, right? They're talking about the end of the world. One of the trailers starts with this ominous introduction about knowing that the time is near. And there's a lot of people out there, including myself, that are discussing these changing times that we're in. So the intro to the video game pretty much starts out with this ominous tone. And as things progress, and the video game isn't released yet, the heroes of the video game come together to take on this domestic terror threat. And there obviously are a number of people that have been radicalized on the internet, and I'm not denying that. But on the other end of things, here they've used the video game industry to make certain things popular, going into the military, shoot-'em-up games really being this realm of fantasy, but something that people genuinely do fantasize about being able to do as an occupation, especially when you're a young American coming up in the economy of today and the economy that is being created. And all these enemies are also being created for these future soldiers to be fighting. And so we've seen what they've done in the past. We've also seen how they've put the Middle Eastern boogeyman in the movies like True Lies and others in Hollywood films way in advance. So here we see art imitating life, a video game coming out as the SPLC calls the sovereigns the #1 domestic terror threat within the United States.